So I'm looking at this first photo, which shows me in a dog kennel sitting outside just outside the chook yard. So when my dad came back from the war, he wanted to have his own farm, so he bought a piece of land out at Quakers Hill and transplanted my poor mother out there. She'd been living in the city all through the war, and my brother had been born during that period, and just after they moved there, a matter of weeks after they moved there, I was born. So we had very little money, but like lots of people then, we lived in actually a converted chook shed with an outside bathroom. Well, not even a bathroom, it was just a bath out in one of the sheds. No fridge, the iceman used to come. But look, I think as long as you have enough to eat and you're warm and most importantly you're loved, then you don't really feel poor. It was just that's what life was like in those days. But I was always in the dirt, and as you can see there, in the dog kennel and eating the chook's food, and always did like to get my hands down there and into things. Now, the first day I started school, I looked at the teacher and thought, that's what I want to be. So all the way through school, I had that ambition, and this picture shows me I've sort of well on my way, because this is taken at Teachers College at Wagga. I'd spent lots of holidays in my childhood. I had relatives that lived in Tumbarumba and loved that part of the world, so I was really excited about being able to go away to college and live in a dormitory. And this is me in the dorm. I would have been probably 17 at that stage, and long hair, and really enjoying the company and the friends that I made there, and well on the way to becoming a teacher. I was so fortunate because halfway through my first year at Teachers College, I got to go to America. I'd applied for an exchange student scholarship, just captured by the magic of the whole idea, and my wonderful parents were very, very, very supportive, and so they helped to get me there. My dad, who as a returned serviceman had always been involved with his local RSL sub-branch, actually found that they were prepared to help to pay for some of the fees, which was really, really good of them. And all I had to do was send back a report every month on what I was doing. So they got the full gamut of going when I went to the football games, and when I went to the prom, and all those other fun things that American teenagers do. And I had such a wonderful time, and I didn't realise at the time actually how much it made you grow as well, because you're away from all your normal support base. Yes, you're living with a family. Yes, you've got friends there, but it's not the same. You're sort of on good behaviour all the time. You can never lose your temper or get cross about things. But as I said, it was a great experience in helping you to grow up and stand on your own 2 feet. And I'm actually later in this year, in 2013, going back to America and staying with one of my American sisters from the family that I lived with. So it's been lifelong friendships and a wonderful, wonderful experience. Now this next picture shows me in my 3rd year of teaching. I came back from America. The education department was really kind and very supportive of the exchange schemes, so they allowed me and one other girl actually to leave in the middle of first year at college, come back to pick up first year with the next group coming through, and then finish again the following year. What was interesting about that following year is that it was the last year of the leaving certificate people, so big changes were going to happen after that, and we were a very special group in that way. After I finished college, I was appointed to a school at Busby out in the western suburbs of Sydney, and it was tough going in the beginning because they were big classes, and some difficult children. Even though I was only teaching very young children, it was still amazing how difficult they could be. But you pick up your skills all the time, and by the time this picture was taken, that was in the 3rd year I was there, you can see I had the most delightful group of children, and we had a really good time, and I was in many ways sorry to leave, but life moved on. And here's a lovely wedding photo at the end of that 3rd year of teaching, when I was 23, on my 23rd birthday actually. I was married to Rob. He was just a couple of months older than me. You look at this photo, we look as if we could very well be 15. We look so young, don't we? But that was my 23rd birthday. We wanted to be married early in the school holidays at Christmas. My birthday's just after Christmas, so when we went to book the reception place, they said, well, the only date we have available that week is the Wednesday, and it was my birthday, and I thought, well, might as well be married on your birthday rather than the day before or the day after your birthday. So he was my probably best birthday present ever. And we were very fortunate because he came from Dural. By this stage I was living at Pennant Hills. My parents had sold the farm, and we were living at Pennant Hills, and that's how I met him. He came from Dural, and his father had 16 acres in a block there, and so we thought, well, we wonder if he'd let us buy the bushy little block down the end. Weren't we spoilt? So just about the same time his father sold the rest of it and retired up to the north coast, and we bought that bushy little block and built a house, and we're still there. Area that was first settled in 1820, and the original settling family is still there. But when my daughter started, who's the younger of my children, when my daughter started school and I decided I'd go back full time, I found that there was a waiting list at the time, and the Department of Education said, look, it might be 3 years before you can get a full-time position, which was unheard of in those days. It's half of the course now. So I had become really interested in horticulture. And when I look back, I can see there was always a bit of a love of plants. I can remember the beautiful trees in America. I can remember, just throw this one in here, when I was a child, I went to Luna Park. I was taken to Luna Park. Everyone was excited about going to Luna Park, as I was. And then I found out when I got there that Luna Park was not the beautiful park I thought it was going to be. It was actually, rides and things like that, which, while it was fun, was not what I had in mind. So always through my life I'd had a love of plants and things growing, and over those years with the children home and young, I had actually spent more time in my garden and had learnt a lot, and it had become a bit of an obsession. So I thought, well, if I can't get a teaching job for a few years, I'll go back to, I'll study again, and I'll study horticulture. When I contacted the TAFE College at Ryde, which was the biggest college for horticulture in Sydney, I discovered that you had to have a job in the industry to get into the course. Well, of course, one of the great things about living at Dural is that there are lots of nurseries around. So I got a part-time job in a little wholesale nursery. Then I went to another one. Then I went into retail, first at Parker's at Turramurra, and then eventually at Swain's. By this stage, of course, the children were getting well up in primary school, and the attractions of teaching were starting to fade, so I never went back to teaching. And this picture shows me there at Swain's with the team there, and obviously it was Christmas time because they've got the Santa Claus on the old wagon that used to be taken out the front of the nursery. Very interesting years. I was there for 7 years, and learnt lots, made good friends, but again then it was time to move on. Now, while the children were growing up, but while they were still in primary school, we took the opportunity to, I guess, return the favour, and that is to give a home to some exchange students from various parts of the world. This was such an interesting time in our lives, because having visitors from overseas does make you do all those things and go to all those places that you don't normally get around to doing. And so we had a wonderful time. Our first was, and he's in this picture there, is Matthias from Germany, and as I said, the children were still in primary school, so Matt started at the local high school, and he was just the opposite of anything that you ever imagine about Germans. You know, he was very, had a great sense of humour, loved to bend and break rules. Thought I was the most boring thing under the sun because I wouldn't let him drive. It was a very strict rule of the exchange student program that the students weren't to drive, and he thought that was terrible. Famously twisted his glasses by putting them in the microwave to try and bend them into shape, and they were never the same again. So he was just wonderful, and we had such a great year with him. And caught up with him, as I said, last year when he's living in Salzburg at the moment, so we thought that was very nice of him to live in such a picturesque city. But where he came from was actually lovely too, because he came from Coburg, which is the small city that Prince Albert came from, you know, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg, and gorgeous town with the castle in the middle. And we've stayed there a couple of times and met up with his mother, and she's been out to visit us, which was lovely. So in 1992, I was asked to come to Yates to fill in for 2 months while somebody was on long service leave. This wonderful man who used to write pieces about Yates and talk to customers, do some of their PR, etc. And he was going to Europe with his wife. So I had left Swain's about a year before. I'd written a couple of books, gardening books, and was intending to write more. I'd started doing some radio work. I'd actually started doing radio work when I was at Swain's, filling in for Valerie Swain, who was on the ABC in those days. So my first radio experience would have been in the late 1990s, I guess. Late 1980s, around about 1990, I suppose, yeah. Anyway, I came to Yates, as I said, to fill in for 2 months, and Don took his wife, the chap who was doing the job, took his wife to Europe, became ill while he was away, and so he had to come back early from his trip. And so I said to him then, well, look, I'll just stay, I'll keep the seat warm while you're away until you're well enough to come back. And sadly, he had cancer and he died the next year, and so I just gradually slipped into this full-time job. And it was so, as John Lennon said, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. I never intended to get a full-time, full-on job, but it was great timing. The children were just sort of getting towards the end of high school, so they didn't need me as much, and Yates has been fantastic. I've had wonderful opportunities, continued doing radio work all the way through. Probably the thing of which I'm proudest is that I have been responsible for 5 editions of Yates Garden Guide, and this picture shows me with not the most recent, I think that was the one before, sitting in my garden, very proudly showing off the latest edition of the guide. So it's the best-selling gardening book in Australia and New Zealand, and because it was first published in 1895, then it's almost a trust to carry it on, to make changes that will modernise it so that it's appropriate for the present, but also to stay true to what it stood for in the past. I mean, one of the joys of my job at Yates, one of the things I love most, is that I get to keep the archives. And I always joke it's because I'm the oldest person here, but there's a fantastic archival collection of old photographs and old books, and they really are quite a treasure for gardening in Australia, and even for Australian life. I mean, last year I scanned, over a few weeks, probably a couple of months, I scanned all the newsletters that the company produced during the Second World War from 1942 to 1946 on a monthly basis, and they're a superb picture. They give a superb picture of life in the company at the time, but also messages that were coming back from overseas, what those members of staff were going through, you know, the various problems they were facing, but also they're funny, you know, the sense of humour that kept people going through that time. So being responsible for preserving these things and fighting sometimes through the changes of ownership we've had to keep that collection together and move it from one place to another. I've been very proud to do that.